Okay, look, hear me out. Maybe Scientology isn't that bad.
Your days of fighting for the so-called greater good are over. This is our chance to control the truth, the concepts of right and wrong for everyone for centuries to come. You're fighting to save an ideal that doesn't exist. Never did. You need to pick a side.
How's it going, guys? Welcome back to my channel and time for another episode of Luke's Reviews. On today's video, Tom Cruise is back in the saddle as Ethan Hunt as he prepares to dazzle us with outrageous stunts, ridiculous action set pieces, all on the big screen in Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Ethan Hunt and the IMF are tasked with yet another impossible mission should they choose to accept, when an artificial intelligence originally sought to be used by governments turns its allegiance to mutual societal destruction. And with it constantly learning and being one step ahead of everyone at play, that means no one is safe, and this time round the mission might not be successful. Last year, Tom Cruise revitalized the movie-going experience with a little film called Top Gun: Maverick. It was a must-see event made for the big screen, and after the past few years, with the pandemic and audiences being disillusioned with the cinema-going experience as a whole, watching Cruise and co. flying at top speed in fighter jets was exactly what the industry needed. So expectations were pretty high for Dead Reckoning Part 1. Could Cruise do it again? Could he pull the audiences in? Not to mention the last Mission Impossible movie, Mission Impossible Fallout. I contest that to be one of the greatest action blockbusters in the modern era. So no pressure. Truth be told, Dead Reckoning Part 1, I don't think it's as good as Fallout, but that being said, nothing really is. Nonetheless though, I'm very happy to say that Dead Reckoning Part 1 is yet another home run for Tom Cruise and Christopher McQuarrie, and up there among some of the best films of the year so far. Dead Reckoning Part 1 clocks in at around about 2.5 hours, and believe me when I say it feels half the length. This movie moves at such a relentless pace that even the opening studio credits feel like they've been sped up, as if to go, dude, we need to get this shit done because we've got a lot to cover. Now, where Mission Impossible films have often failed in the past is usually to do with the antagonist. There aren't very many memorable Mission Impossible villains. I think off the top of my head, the only ones that really stand out are Philip Seymour Hoffman from Mission Impossible 3 and Henry Cavill from Mission Impossible Fallout. But to ask yourself a question, just try this out. Can you remember a specific plot or a scheme that the antagonists are trying to do in a Mission Impossible movie? Props if you can, but I'd struggle. So this time around, McQuarrie has taken a bit of a gamble in creating a primary antagonist that has no face, no body, no voice. It's actually a computer program. It's called The Entity, and it's formidable in a sense because it is always one step ahead of the IMF in every single thing that they do. Nevertheless, we do actually have to have someone for Cruise to punch in the face, whether it be on a train or in a car or wherever he decides to jump off next, and that comes in the form of Esai Morales, who stars as Gabriel. I thought he did a pretty good job at being the menacing prophet for this AI deity. But he also has this really suave persona about him that helped balance the character out. Of course, Cruise is doing what Cruise does best. He's being steely, a badass. But this time round, I found that Ethan Hunt felt very desperate. It's like he was aware of the the situation that he's up against, and you feel a lot more that his back is really being pushed into a corner. And yes, the stunts he pulls off are as insane as they look. The motorcycle jump off the cliff is arguably one of the greatest cinematic stunts ever put to film. The entire audience in my screening were silent when he went over the edge, almost as if we were all holding our collective breath. Even if you have seen it in the trailers, once you find out the context of why he's doing that, it makes it so much more intense. And that is just one set piece of so many. Each of them bringing their own unique and vibrant flavor, which is probably why the film's runtime soars at places. From a tense game of cat and mouse across an international airport to a slapstick car chase through the streets of Rome that puts the Fast X bomb ball chase through Rome to shame. To finally capping off the film with an electric train sequence that will, I promise you, have you on the edge of your seat. McQuarrie is exceptionally talented at blocking action, so you feel as immersed as possible, and that it feels tangible, because for the most part, they do an amazing job at keeping the action practical. Not to mention with a thumping score and expert sound design that helps merge one into the other, there is a reason why these guys are pioneers at blockbuster action filmmaking. Coming along for this ride, admittedly, are some familiar faces. We've got the likes of Ving Rhames back as Luther and Simon Pegg back as Benji. Admittedly, they don't have a boatload of screen time, but their presence is welcome as always, and they can usually help alleviate some of the intensity with a dash of humour. Rebecca Ferguson returns as Ilsa Faust, although I would say to temper your expectations slightly if you're an Ilsa Faust fan. There are certain choices made which result in her having fleeting appearances throughout the film, which I thought was disappointing, because Ferguson is an immensely talented actress, and I've always liked what Ilsa brings to the IMF. Instead, acting as Hunt's predominant supporting partner for the film, we have Hayley Atwell as Grace, a gifted thief who winds up getting herself caught in quite the dire straits. Atwell is splendid in the role, pairing well with Cruise, but also coming onto the scene as a character who is seriously out of her depth. She probably gets the most development out of all of the characters, but I would argue that's only because we've spent a lot of time with many of these other characters already, so there isn't as much development needed. Two other names that I want to shout out are Klementieff and Shea Wiggum. Klementieff stars as Gabriel's henchwoman, and my god, she does not f*** around. Extremely menacing, almost crazy at times. I loved her presence in this film and what she brought, and now that she's kind of put the Guardians to one side and that chapter has closed for her, I'm really excited to see what doors and what opportunities open up for her from here on out. And also, Shea Wiggum. No one plays a disgruntled cop like Shea Wiggum, and he did exactly what was needed of him in this movie. And look, he doesn't have a gigantic part to play in the film. I just feel like he deserves his flowers. But, as I said at the start of the review, I didn't find this one as good as Fallout. Why is that? Well, the story can get quite convoluted. I was concerned that it was going to suffer from what I call Part 1-itis. It's where you set up a lot of stuff and you end on maybe a cliffhanger, and a lot of your threads aren't resolved. There are a lot of loose ends that aren't tied up, and whilst it may work as a first part of a two-part film or even longer, it still feels like an incomplete film. And that wasn't the case here. I feel like it does a really good job of tying everything up, but also leaving us wanting more for what will come in part 2. No. My problem with Dead Reckoning Part 1 was that it got a little distracted with the double crosses and the betrayals, and I could have just done with the movie feeling more streamlined. Also, look, I'm aware that the focus of a Mission Impossible movie should always be on the mission that they're trying to complete. But I also could have done with a few more character-driven scenes, just so we can have a rough idea of where our core characters are at mentally, emotionally. There's a really, really good scene featuring Luther, Benji, and Grace as they discuss the responsibility and the sacrifices that you have to make as an IMF agent. But that's one scene. The only real fleshing out of characters that I saw in a 2.5-hour movie. Now, I'm not that disappointed because it substitutes that for insanely good action set pieces, so I can't be too mad. But moving forward, I don't want this series to be afraid of these quieter scenes where we can get to understand and feel for these characters more. And so my final note with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 actually is to do with IMAX. Now, I was very fortunate enough to see this film in an IMAX showing, and as far as I was aware going in, was that they had shot sequences of the film with IMAX cameras, so I was really excited to see it open up into that full IMAX aspect ratio, to see Tom Cruise driving off that cliff, parachuting down in full IMAX. I could not wait, but it didn't happen. Now, if this happened for you, you went to see this in IMAX and it opened up into the full ratio, tell me. Because I don't know if this was a fault with the cinema that I was in, or whether it was just how it was released. But if it is how it was released, I'm really sorry, but they missed out on such an amazing opportunity to have that IMAX aspect ratio kick in. It worked tremendously well for the Burj Khalifa sequence and for Tom Cruise's Halo jump in Fallout. Seeing the ratio expand gave me goosebumps, and I was sorely missing that here with Dead Reckoning Part 1. Again, if it was there for you, please let me know. All in all, you'd be hard-pushed to find a more adrenaline-infused, high-octane trip to the cinemas this year than Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. You've got a crew of filmmakers who are operating at the height of their powers, delivering audiences with perfectly orchestrated set pieces set to a gripping story that pits our characters against a genuinely unstoppable threat. This is one of those movies where you can treat yourself. Find a massive cinema to watch it in, great sound system, get some snacks, and go on one heck of an adventure. I am all for Cruise and McQuarrie working together until the end of time itself. So I'm going to give Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 a 9 out of 10. Anyway guys, those are my thoughts on Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Wow, these movie titles are just not getting any shorter. Let me know, have you had a chance to see the film yet? What did you think? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And my question to you, of all the Mission Impossible movies so far, what's your favourite stunt? For me, look, there are many to choose from, but when I saw Tom Cruise climbing and dangling off of the Burj Khalifa, it was one of the very few moments where my jaw quite literally dropped. It's gonna take some real going to ever top that, in my opinion. But that is all we have time for here today, so thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Hello, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have, make sure to click that like button, and if you aren't already, click that subscribe button too.